Ryan Zinke, former Navy SEAL and congressman from Montana, is on the job after being confirmed and sworn in this week. The Interior Department manages our country's federal lands. That's more than 500 million acres, or about 1/5 of all the land in the United States, including national parks, wildlife refuges, and other public lands. The Interior Department brings in more than $9 billion from leasing land and other activities. Its budget right now is just over $13 billion, which the Trump administration has reportedly asked the agency to cut by just 10%. Secretary Ryan Zinke joins me now. It's such an honor to have you here, sir.
Great to be with you, Danny.
Mr. Secretary, if I could start. So you are the first Montanan to ever serve in a presidential cabinet. And this morning when you talked about your vision, you talked about a former president of ours. Who was that?
Well, certainly Teddy Roosevelt. And I guess my vision comes from the Teddy Roosevelt Arch in Yellowstone National Park. It says, for the benefit and enjoyment of the people. And I think the Interior needs to realize that our public lands are for the benefit and enjoyment of all of us.
I know that a lot of people in the West, I actually was born in Wyoming myself, do feel like Washington sort of forgets them sometimes and forgets the purpose of our public lands.
Well, you're exactly right. And as you go further west, there is a gap in trust. And one of the biggest jobs I have is to restore trust and to make sure our infrastructure, and some of it is cutting the regulation, the red tape, even to get at our infrastructure. You know, people forget our parks have bridges and roads, and a lot of it is making sure the regulation allows us to repair our bridges.
And yesterday, you rescinded a last-minute sort of Obama administration rule. Can you tell us about that and if there's more in store?
Well, one of them was a ban on lead ammunition. And if you're a hunter and fisherman, certainly your rounds are going to be lead and your fish hooks are going to be lead. And I think it was as a pushback on what I would say traditional use of our lands, which is hunting and fishing. And that's incredibly important, I think, for those that use our public lands. And there will be more. My charter is to look at every regulation and make sure it's appropriate, make sure we protect public access, make sure we protect, the multiple use aspect of much of our public lands.
Will you be able to live with a 10% cut that the administration will propose?
We're going back and forth. I certainly support the president's vision of we need to be held accountable in how we use our taxpayer dollars. A lot of it is making sure we don't leave any stone unturned. So I do support the president's vision of making sure we're held accountable, making sure that what we do is in the best interest of the taxpayers. But the nice thing about the Interior is we have a lot of holdings, and a lot of those holdings can be multiple used to create wealth and jobs.
Yes, I think people forget that the Interior Department actually brings revenue into the government. It's not just spending. Switching gears. You had a very interesting experience with the Commander-in-Chief, President Trump, when he went to Dover to receive the body of the fallen Navy SEAL, Ryan Owens. And as a former Navy SEAL yourself, and watching a Commander-in-Chief deal with what is the most awesome responsibility of his duties, could you describe what that was like from your perspective?
Well, I did have the opportunity and the honor of going with the president and also Scott Taylor, a former SEAL who was a congressman representing Virginia. We both went to Dover with the president to receive the body. And I can tell you at that moment, what I saw is a creation of a commander-in-chief. He clearly understood the gravity of his actions. It was a very solemn moment to be with the body as it comes home. And be with the family. And I saw a distinct change in our president from before, from after. The next day was a prayer breakfast, and I looked at the president and I knew at that moment that he would be a great commander-in-chief based on a single experience.
And then, of course, he paid tribute, led the nation in paying tribute to his widow, Corinne, which was an amazing moment.
I thought it was absolutely appropriate, and it was a record again. But if we can learn from the death of a hero, is our nation should be understand the sacrifices that our special operations and all our military are making.
Let me ask you about yesterday. You had a very interesting introduction as you decided to go to the Interior Department in solidarity with the U.S. Park Police, mounted on one of a horse. Now, is this horse yours?
It was not. It's part of the Park Police, but as the President gave a nod in his State of the Union address to our law enforcement, I thought it was appropriate to follow his lead and pay tribute to our mounted police that do a great job. And as a Montanan, I think it was the point where I kind of kid that it's Teddy Roosevelt and the Rough Riders meeting in Interior, and I thought it was an appropriate beginning.
Well, I loved it. I thought it was great. I don't know if you know this, but you could maybe tell. I'm a big fan of the Interior Department. I used to work at White House Council on Environmental Quality of the Western background. And on Inauguration Day on the 5, we were all asked to give our advice to President Trump. And I wanted to have you listen to my advice and tell me what you think of it. Can we take a listen? I would pick a few of the national parks that he hasn't visited before and take his family and go and experience some of the wonders of America that he might not have seen before. So like Glacier National Park or Yellowstone. I'm a big fan of the parks. I hope you can get the president to go out with you.
Well, remember, a great president was also from New York, Teddy Roosevelt. So I would encourage him to follow, the president to follow your exact advice, is follow the footprint of Teddy Roosevelt. Go out, get on a horse, and visit some of our finest treasures.
I mean, you might not know this yet, but your Park Service has one of the best social media programs on Instagram, on Facebook, and Twitter. So you can maybe give them a little bit of a boost. Don't cut them in the budget.
No, I look forward. We have a great team, and certainly it's a great responsibility to be the steward of what I think are the greatest lands in the majesty of our country.
All right, Mr. Secretary, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, police investigating